The 4 biggest unsolved mysteries in history. How can a human being carry 50,000 pounds? What happened to that legendary aviator? These are some of the questions that remain unanswered to this day. We are fascinated by mysteries, and an unsolved mysteries is like an itch we can't scratch. We want answers and are driven to great lengths to get them. Check out these 4 unsolved mysteries that have been baffling people for years. See if you gain any insight and get closer to an answer. But before all that, make sure you click the subscribe button and turn on notifications to be one of the first Brightsiders to watch our videos. Number 4. Lost at sea. Do you know the name of the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic? What about the first person to fly solo from Hawaii to the US mainland? That would be Amelia Earhart. She was a legendary aviator from America and a force to be reckoned with. She set many flying records and championed the advancement of women in aviation. In 1937, Amelia Earhart wanted to fly all the way around the world, a prospect that would scare many. With navigator Fred Noonan by her side, she set off that year from Oakland, California. The first stops on her trip were successful. However, en route to Howland Island, they just disappeared. There are many theories surrounding Amelia Earhart's disappearance. The first theory is that Earhart and her co-pilots simply ran out of fuel and crashed in the Pacific Ocean. The second theory is that Earhart and Noonan crash-landed on an island, survived the crash, and were taken prisoner by Japanese forces, who were expanding their territory before World War I. A History Channel documentary supports this theory. In 2017, they released photographic evidence, which analysts argued showed Earhart and Noonan in the background after being rescued by a ship. Many people were excited to have found a definite clue to her disappearance. But later that same year, a Japanese military blogger pointed out a flaw. He claimed that the photo predated her disappearance, explaining that the picture was published in 1935, 2 years before Amelia Earhart made her flight. The third theory is that the plane crash-landed on Niku Island, possibly as the result of a navigation error. Niku is part of a small island in the Pacific, part of Kiribati. This theory is currently supported by a researcher from the University of Tennessee who claims to have solved the mystery. The researcher took a closer look at data gathered from bones picked up in the 1940s from the island. He said there's a strong chance the bones belong to Earhart, but the bones themselves are long gone. The researcher only used data gathered by another researcher. With the actual bones unavailable, there is no way of knowing for sure if they belong to Earhart. For now, her disappearance remains a mystery. Number 3. The Unsinkable Ship. Most of the world is familiar with the story of the Titanic. It sailed from Southampton with 2,224 people on board, and it hit an iceberg 3 days later. On April 15, 1912, she sank with 1,500 people still on board. We know that other important ships that sank have been recovered from the sea, like the Swedish warship Vasa and the USS Arizona. So, why hasn't the Titanic been retrieved from the water? Actually, just days after the Titanic sank, expeditions were carried out to recover the wreckage. But there were 2 big problems. Firstly, in 1912, they didn't have the technology available to pull 52,310 tons of wreckage out of the water, so the expeditions had to wait until the second half of the 20th century. But that's when the expeditions encountered their second problem. No one knew where the Titanic wreck actually was. Teams failed to find the Titanic because, as it turns out, the wreck was located almost 15 miles from where the ship sent its distress signals. It wasn't until 1985 that the wreck was discovered by accident. A U.S. Navy commander led an American-French expedition into the Atlantic Ocean to test the technology on a new submersible and find the wreck of 2 nuclear submarines that had sunk. In the middle of his quest, he discovered the Titanic's debris and later the entire ship. He saw that the ship had split in half, with each half lying within about 1/3 of a mile from the other. The bow section was in fairly good condition and still standing, but the stern section had almost completely crumbled. So, if the Titanic was found, why haven't they pulled it out? Titanic lies 2.35 miles below the waves, where the temperature is frigid and the pressure high. Exploring the Titanic is difficult and expensive, let alone trying to excavate it. Because it's been deteriorating on the ocean floor for such a long time, the chances are high that if they tried to pull the Titanic out of the ocean at this point, the whole ship would just crumble. But if you need to know everything there is to know about the Titanic, don't worry. You can take a luxury dive to the wreck in 2019. If you have over $100,000, that is. As always, we remain fascinated by the story of this ship. Number 2. Massive stones. Stonehenge is a massive monument located just north of Salisbury, England. Research shows that Stonehenge was built 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. The biggest stones there, known as sarsen stones, are up to 30 feet tall and weigh 25 tons. That's 50,000 pounds. These stones are believed to have been brought from the North Wessex Downs area, specifically Marlborough Downs, which is 20 miles from Stonehenge. The smaller stones, known as blue stones, weigh up to 4 tons, 8,000 pounds, and they are believed to have been transported over 140 miles. The average human can lift 100 to 150 pounds. So the question that has baffled the world is, how were the people living in that prehistoric time able to cart these 50,000-pound stones around? Picture that for a second. To make matters more confusing, in 2015, just 2 miles away from the Stonehenge site, British archaeologists found the remains of a massive stone monument that was 15 times the size of the Stonehenge monument. Researchers don't know how the stones were used, how they got there, or why the monument was built. The culture that put them there left no written records and had no assistance from wheels or pulley systems to carry the stones. A vast number of theories have tried to make sense of Stonehenge. Some say it was a place people visited for its healing properties. Others say it is connected to the winter and summer solstices. Another theory claims that Stonehenge was a place where the British people could unify, and they could work together to haul these massive stones as an act of unification. A new theory says that Stonehenge might have been a burial site for the elite. A study conducted in 2018 focused on the remains of the people buried at Stonehenge. No easy task considering the remains had been cremated. The study showed that 40% of the people buried there had come from West Wales. So we know that Stonehenge was largely built by people who originated from West Wales, but the question is why it was built and how they moved the stones remains unanswered. Number 1. Island of Treasure. We are thrilled by stories of treasure hunts. Along Canada's Atlantic coast, off the shores of Nova Scotia, there's an island with a tale of hidden treasure, mystery, and booby traps. Oak Island is home to what is known as the Money Pit. The Money Pit is a deep hole 13 feet in diameter. It was discovered by a teenager in 1795. Thinking of hidden pirate treasure, the teenager and his friends began digging, but their efforts were fruitless. But underneath the surface of the pit, they did find a series of wooden platforms. In the summer of 1804, the Onslow Company found a stone tablet with secret symbols. For years, people couldn't decipher it. It wasn't until 1860 that an academic translated the symbols. They read, 40 feet below, 2 million pounds are buried. Some theories hold that in addition to money, there are important historical artifacts in the pit. Marie Antoinette's jewels, religious artifacts, and some of Shakespeare's manuscripts. When the Onslow Company continued to dig, a flooding mechanism was triggered and they gave up on their efforts. Over the years, many others have continued to dig, but no treasure has been found. Even former President Franklin Delano Roosevelt was moved to uncover the mystery. When he was 27, he spent a summer in Nova Scotia in search of the treasure. But, like many others, he had to admit defeat. Though people have searched for over 200 years, we still don't know who dug the pit, why it was created, or if the alleged treasure will ever be found. Which mystery would you like to have answered? Do you know of any other strange and unsolved mysteries in history? If so, tell us in the comments. And don't forget to click subscribe to stay on the bright side of life.